What happens when a daytime television host pushes a beloved guest too far on live television? In just 47 seconds, one comment about mental health would spark the most explosive confrontation in daytime TV history and end with a host being forcibly removed from his own show. The studio lights were bright that morning as the Loose Women panel settled into their seats. Piers Morgan sat at the head of the table, his usual smirk already in place. Next to him were panelists Ruth Langsford, Janet Street Porter, and Colleen Nolan. Across from them sat today's special guest, actress Denise Welch, who had been invited to discuss her mental health advocacy work. The interview started normally enough. Ruth welcomed Denise with genuine warmth, asking her about her recent projects. But it was clear from the moment Denise began speaking about her depression that Piers was already preparing to pounce. "So Denise," Piers interrupted, barely 30 seconds into her answer, "you've made quite the career out of talking about being sad, haven't you?" The studio went silent. Ruth's eyes widened. Colleen shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Janet looked ready to intervene, but Denise raised her hand calmly. "I've made a career out of acting, Piers. I talk about depression because it nearly killed me, and I want to help others who are suffering." Piers leaned back in his chair, that condescending smile spreading across his face. "Oh, here we go. Everyone's got depression these days. Back in my day, we just called it having a bad day and got on with it." "Piers," Ruth interjected quickly, "I don't think that's fair." But Piers wasn't finished. He turned to the camera, speaking as if Denise wasn't even there. "You see, this is what's wrong with society today. Everyone wants to be a victim. Everyone wants attention. Everyone's got some sort of condition that means they can't just pull themselves together." Denise's jaw tightened, but her voice remained steady. "That's not what depression is, Piers. It's a medical condition. Would you tell someone with diabetes to just pull themselves together?" "Oh, don't give me that rubbish," Piers shot back, waving his hand dismissively. "Depression, anxiety, all these trendy mental health buzzwords. It's just an excuse for people who can't handle real life. You know what cured depression in the old days? A proper job and some discipline." Denise's eyes narrowed, but before she could respond, Piers continued his tirade. "And another thing," he added, leaning forward aggressively, "why is it always celebrities talking about mental health? Why is it always people in the public eye who suddenly discover they have depression right when they need publicity? It's very convenient timing, isn't it?" "That's not fair at all," Colleen interjected, her voice trembling slightly. "Mental illness doesn't discriminate. It affects everyone." "Does it, though?" Piers challenged, turning his attention to Colleen. "Or have we just created a culture where it's fashionable to claim you're depressed? Where it gets you sympathy and attention?" Ruth's face had gone pale. "Piers, you're being incredibly offensive." "I'm being honest," he countered. "Someone has to say what everyone's thinking. We can't all sit here pretending that every person who says they're sad is clinically depressed. It's gotten out of hand." Denise took a deep breath, her composure impressive given the circumstances. "Piers, I was diagnosed by medical professionals. I was prescribed medication. I had therapy. This wasn't self-diagnosed sadness. This was a serious illness." "So you say," Piers replied with a smirk. "But how do we know? How does anyone really know? You can't take a blood test for depression. You can't x-ray it. It's all just people talking about their feelings." Janet finally spoke up, her voice sharp. "Piers, that's completely ignorant and dangerous." "Dangerous?" Piers laughed, looking around at his co-hosts. "What's dangerous is telling an entire generation that they're all sick and need therapy. What's dangerous is people like her," he pointed at Denise, "making money off pretending to be ill." "Pretending?" Denise's voice rose slightly, though she maintained her composure. "I was hospitalized, Piers. I couldn't get out of bed for weeks. I had suicidal thoughts. That's not pretending." Piers rolled his eyes dramatically. "Oh, suicidal thoughts. How very dramatic. Tell me, Denise, is this another attempt to sell more books? Because I've noticed you bring up your depression every time you've got something to promote. That is disgusting, Ruth said, her voice shaking with anger now. Absolutely disgusting. How dare you trivialize suicide? I'm not trivializing anything, Piers insisted. I'm questioning whether all these celebrity mental health stories are genuine or just publicity stunts. My God, Piers, Janet said, shaking her head. Do you hear yourself? People die from suicide every day. Families are destroyed. Lives are lost. And you're sitting here suggesting it's all fake? Not all of it, Piers clarified, though his tone remained dismissive. But some of it. Maybe even most of it. You can't tell me that every single person who claims to have depression actually has it. It's statistically impossible. Denise's hands were gripping the edge of the table now. What's statistically impossible is your level of ignorance. 1 in 4 people will experience a mental health problem. That's not a trend. That's a health crisis. A health crisis, Piers mocked, using air quotes. Everything's a crisis nowadays. Mental health crisis. Climate crisis. Housing crisis. Maybe the real crisis is that people have forgotten how to be resilient. Colleen gasped audibly. Piers, stop it. But he continued, his voice dripping with sarcasm. What's next? Are we going to have someone on claiming they're traumatized by a mean tweet? Should we all walk on eggshells because someone had a sad childhood? My clinical depression has nothing to do with promoting anything, Denise replied, her patience clearly wearing thin. I speak about it because people are dying, Piers. They're taking their own lives because of the stigma that people like you perpetuate. People like me? Piers feigned offense. People like me who live in the real world? People like me who understand that life is hard and you just have to get on with it? Yes, guilty as charged. Ruth tried again to steer the conversation. I think what Denise is trying to say is that mental health is just as important as physical health. No, Ruth, Piers interrupted, not even looking at her. What Denise is trying to do is play the victim card, just like she always does. It's tiresome, it's attention-seeking, and quite frankly, it's an insult to people with real problems. Real problems? Denise's voice finally showed her anger. Mental illness is a real problem. It kills more people than most physical diseases. But you wouldn't understand that because you've never experienced real suffering, have you? You've lived your entire privileged life looking down on everyone else from your ivory tower. Piers sat forward aggressively, his face starting to flush red. Don't you dare talk to me about privilege. I've worked for everything I have. I haven't spent my career whining about my feelings on television. No, Denise shot back, her voice getting stronger. You've spent it bullying people who are vulnerable and attacking anyone who shows basic human emotion. You're a bully, Piers, and everyone in this country knows it. Here we go, Piers said, throwing his hands up theatrically. The bully accusation. That's what people always say when they can't handle honest discourse. When they can't handle someone challenging their narrative. This isn't honest discourse, Ruth said firmly. This is you being cruel for the sake of being cruel. There's no journalism here. There's no debate. You're just attacking our guest. I'm doing my job, Piers insisted, his voice rising. My job is to ask the questions that nobody else will ask. My job is to challenge these narratives that everyone else just accepts without question. Your job, Janet said coldly, is to have respectful conversations with guests, not to attack them for having medical conditions. Medical conditions, Piers scoffed. You keep using that phrase like it means something. Show me the science. Show me the proof. Show me the brain scan that proves someone has depression. Denise leaned forward. There are brain scans. There are chemical imbalances. There's decades of research. But you wouldn't know that because you haven't bothered to educate yourself. You've just decided, in your infinite wisdom, that millions of people are lying. Not lying, Piers corrected, wagging his finger at her. Just mistaken. Just weak. Just unable to cope with normal life stresses that previous generations handled, without falling apart. The tension in the studio was electric. The crew behind the cameras had frozen, unsure whether to keep filming. Ruth looked like she wanted to disappear. Janet was nodding in agreement with Denise. Colleen had her hand over her mouth in shock. A bully? Piers's face was reddening now. I'm a journalist who asks tough questions. Just because you can't handle being challenged doesn't make me a bully. Maybe if you spent less time crying and more time developing thicker skin, you wouldn't be so offended by everything. Colleen, who had been mostly silent, finally spoke up, her voice trembling. Piers, please. This has gone way too far. You're hurting people with these words. Hurting people? Piers turned on Colleen now. Oh, for goodness sake, words don't hurt people. Sticks and stones, remember? But I suppose in your world, everything is traumatic, and everyone needs protecting from reality. Words absolutely hurt people, Denise said firmly. Words contribute to stigma. Stigma prevents people from seeking help, and when people don't seek help, they die. Your words today could literally cost lives. You're not challenging me, Piers. You're mocking people with mental illness. There's a difference between asking questions and being deliberately cruel. And right now, on live television, you're showing millions of people exactly why they're afraid to speak up about their mental health. Good, Piers shouted, his composure finally cracking. Maybe they should be afraid to speak up. Maybe we were better off when people dealt with their problems privately instead of broadcasting every little emotion to the world. Maybe we need less people like you encouraging weakness. Janet slammed her hand on the table. That's enough, Piers. You've crossed a line. I'll decide where the line is, thank you very much. Piers snapped at Janet. This is my show. Actually, Ruth said quietly but firmly, it's all of our show, and you're being incredibly inappropriate. Piers turned on Ruth now, his anger expanding to include his co-hosts. Oh, so now you're all ganging up on me? This is typical. I state facts, I speak common sense, and suddenly I'm the bad guy. Meanwhile, he gestured aggressively toward Denise, gets to sit there and peddle her victim narrative without any pushback. Facts? Denise laughed bitterly. You haven't stated a single fact. You've just spouted ignorant, harmful opinions that could genuinely damage vulnerable people watching this. Ignorant? Piers was practically shouting now. I'm one of the most educated journalists in this country. I've interviewed world leaders. I've won awards. And you're calling me ignorant? Yes, Denise said simply, her calmness contrasting sharply with his rage. Being educated doesn't mean you're not ignorant. You know nothing about mental illness, yet you're sitting here telling millions of viewers that it's not real. That's textbook ignorance. Piersy stood up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I don't have to sit here and be insulted by some washed-up actress who's made a career out of being miserable. Sit down, Piers, Colleen said nervously. No, I will not sit down. I will not be spoken to like this on my own program. Do you know who I am? We all know who you are, Janet said coldly. You make sure we never forget. Piers pointed at Denise, his finger shaking with rage. You come on this show, on my show, and you think you can lecture me? You think you can call me names? I could destroy you with one phone call. I have connections. I have power. You're nothing. And there it is, Denise said quietly, looking directly into the camera. That's who Piers Morgan really is. A man who threatens people who disagree with him. A man who thinks power gives him the right to belittle others. How dare you, Piers seethed. How dare you sit there and psychoanalyze me? You're not a doctor. You're just an actress with an opinion and a book deal. Ruth stood up now, placing herself between Piers and Denise. Piers, I think you need to take a break. Go backstage and cool down. I'm not going anywhere, Piers insisted. She needs to apologize. She needs to apologize right now for coming on this show and disrespecting me. Apologize? Denise remained seated, but her voice was strong. I will never apologize for defending people with mental illness. I will never apologize for calling out your dangerous rhetoric. If you can't handle being challenged, maybe you shouldn't be in this chair. Piers's face was now completely red. His hands were balled into fists at his sides. Get out. Get out of this studio right now. No, Denise said calmly. What did you say to me? I said no. You invited me here. I'm a guest. I have every right to be here. If anyone should leave, it's you. The other panelists were watching in stunned silence. This had gone far beyond a normal disagreement. This was a complete meltdown. You cannot tell me to leave my own show, Piers said, his voice now dangerously quiet. It's not your show, Janet interjected. It's our show. And frankly, Piers, your behavior today has been absolutely disgraceful. You've attacked a guest for sharing her experience with mental illness. You've mocked people who are suffering. You've threatened Denise. This isn't journalism. This is bullying. Thank you, Janet, Ruth added, her voice shaking slightly. I agree completely. Piers, what you've said today is unacceptable. Colleen nodded. I've stayed quiet because I hate confrontation. But they're right. You've gone too far. Piers looked around at his co-hosts in disbelief. You're all turning on me? After everything I've done for this show? I made this show relevant. Before I came along, nobody watched this program. That's not true, Ruth said firmly. And even if it were, it wouldn't excuse your behavior. You don't get to treat guests this way. You don't get to spread misinformation about mental health. And you certainly don't get to threaten people. I didn't threaten anyone, Piers protested weakly. Yes, you did, Denise said. You told me you could destroy me with one phone call. That's a threat. Behind the cameras, a producer was speaking urgently into their headset. The director was making frantic hand signals. This segment had gone on much longer than planned, and the situation was spiraling out of control. This is a setup, Piers suddenly declared, looking around wildly. This was planned. You brought her on specifically to attack me. You're all in on it. Don't be ridiculous, Janet said sharply. We brought Denise on to discuss her advocacy work. You're the one who turned it into an attack. I asked legitimate questions, Piers insisted. No, Denise corrected him. You made offensive statements. You called mental illness fake. You accused me of making up my depression for money. Those aren't questions. Those are attacks. A producer finally stepped onto the set, approaching Ruth and whispering in her ear. She nodded, then turned to Piers. Piers, you need to leave the set now. We're going to commercial break, and when we come back, you won't be here. You can't kick me off the show, Piers said incredulously. I'm the host. You're one of the hosts, Ruth corrected, and right now, you're being removed. Security has been called. Piers laughed, but there was no humor in it. Security? You're having me removed by security? This is unbelievable. This is absolutely unbelievable. Two large security guards appeared at the edge of the set. They didn't approach Piers, but their presence was clear. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Ruth said quietly. Piers stared at her, then at Janet, then at Colleen, and finally at Denise. His expression cycled through disbelief, rage, and finally something that might have been embarrassment. Fine, he spat. I'll leave. But this isn't over. I'll have my lawyers looking into this. Wrongful termination, breach of contract, defamation. You'll all be hearing from my legal team. We look forward to it, Janet said dryly. Piers ripped off his microphone, the wire snapping as he yanked too hard. He threw it onto the desk with a clatter. You're all making a huge mistake. A huge mistake. I'm the best thing that ever happened to this show, and you're throwing me out for her? He pointed one last time at Denise, who simply looked at him with an expression of pity rather than anger. Goodbye, Piers, Ruth said firmly. Piers turned and stormed toward the exit, the security guards following at a discreet distance. As he reached the edge of the set, he turned back one final time. "You'll regret this," he shouted. "All of you, especially you," he directed at Denise. "Nobody crosses Piers Morgan and gets away with it." "Is that another threat?" Janet called after him. But Piers was already gone, the studio door, slamming behind him with a resounding bang that echoed through the suddenly silent studio. For a moment, nobody moved. The three remaining panelists and Denise sat frozen, trying to process what had just happened. The crew behind the cameras were equally stunned, some with their mouths hanging open. Finally, Ruth let out a long breath. "Well," she said, attempting to regain some composure, "that certainly wasn't what we had planned for today's show." Denise laughed, a slightly shaky sound that broke the tension. "Is he always like that?" "No," Colleen said honestly. "That was worse than usual. I've never seen him completely lose control like that." "He showed his true colors," Janet said, no sympathy in her voice. "Good riddance, I say." Ruth turned to Denise with genuine concern. "Are you all right? That was incredibly intense, and you handled it with remarkable grace." "I'm fine," Denise assured her. "I've dealt with worse than Piers Morgan. But I appreciate your concern." "You were brilliant," Colleen said earnestly. "Standing up to him like that, not backing down. You said everything that needed to be said." "Someone had to," Denise replied. "I couldn't sit there and let him spew that nonsense about mental health without challenging it. Too many people are watching. Too many people are struggling. His words could have done real harm." The producer approached again, this time addressing the whole group. "We need to go to commercial and regroup. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation with just the four of you. Is everyone okay with that?" They all nodded. As the commercial break began, the studio erupted in chatter. Crew members were talking excitedly, some pulling out their phones to text or call colleagues. Everyone knew they had just witnessed television history. "Do you think he'll actually sue?" Colleen asked nervously during the break. "Let him try," Janet said dismissively. "Everything is recorded. We have proof of exactly what he said. Any lawyer worth their fee will tell him to drop it." Ruth was checking her phone, her eyes widening. "It's already online. People are posting about it. The hashtag is trending." "What's the reaction?" Denise asked. Ruth scrolled through her phone. "Overwhelmingly supportive of you. People are praising you for standing up to him. There are a few of his fans defending him, but they're being drowned out." Janet smiled grimly. "He's finally done it. He's finally pushed too far." As they prepared to return from commercial break, Ruth addressed Denise one more time. "I'm so sorry that happened. You came here to talk about your important work, and instead you had to deal with that appalling behavior." "Don't apologize," Denise said warmly. "What happened here today needed to happen. Sometimes the only way to expose a bully is to stand up to them publicly. And now, millions of people saw exactly who Piers Morgan is when he's challenged." The floor manager began counting them down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The cameras were rolling again, but Piers Morgan's chair sat conspicuously empty. Ruth addressed the viewers directly, her voice steady and professional. "Welcome back to Loose Women. As you just witnessed, we've had an unexpected development on today's show. Piers Morgan has been removed from the panel following his unacceptable comments about mental health and his treatment of our guest, Denise Welch." Janet picked up the thread. "We want to be absolutely clear. Mental illness is real. Depression is real. Anxiety is real. These are medical conditions that deserve respect and proper treatment, not mockery or dismissal." Colleen added, her voice emotional. "If you're struggling with your mental health, please don't let what you heard today discourage you from seeking help. What Piers said was wrong. You are not weak. You are not attention-seeking. Your feelings are valid." Denise smiled at the three women beside her, then looked directly into the camera. "Thank you all for your support. To anyone watching who is dealing with mental illness, I want you to know that you are not alone. Don't let anyone tell you that your struggle isn't real. Don't let anyone make you feel ashamed for seeking help. You are strong. You are brave. And you deserve compassion and understanding. Ruth concluded, "We'll be continuing our conversation with Denise about her advocacy work and the important resources available for mental health support. But first, we want to acknowledge that what you just saw was difficult to watch. We don't condone Piers' behavior, and we stand firmly with everyone in the mental health community." The show continued, but the atmosphere had completely changed. What should have been a routine interview had become a defining moment. Denise spoke passionately about her work, about the charities she supports, about the lives that had been saved through mental health awareness. The remaining panelists asked thoughtful questions, shared their own experiences, and created exactly the kind of supportive conversation that Piers had tried to prevent. In the control room, the producers were already fielding calls from media outlets wanting statements. The show's social media accounts were flooded with comments, mostly supportive, but some calling for more heads to roll. The clip of Piers' meltdown was being shared thousands of times per minute. Back in the studio, as the show drew to a close, Ruth made one final statement. Today's show didn't go as planned, but sometimes the most important moments are the unplanned ones. We stood up for what's right. We stood up for our guest. And we stood up for everyone watching who has ever been made to feel small or invalid because of their mental health struggles. Janet nodded firmly, and we'd do it again in a heartbeat. As the closing credits rolled and the cameras finally stopped, Denise was immediately surrounded by crew members offering their congratulations and support. Several told her about their own experiences with mental illness, thanking her for being so brave on live television. Ruth hugged Denise tightly. "You were extraordinary today. Truly extraordinary." "So were you all," Denise replied. "It took courage to stand up to him like that, to have him removed from the show. That couldn't have been easy." "It was easier than you might think," Janet said. "We've all been waiting for someone to finally put him in his place. You gave us the opportunity, and we took it." Colleen, who had been quiet during the aftermath, finally spoke up. "I've been scared of him for so long. Scared to disagree. Scared to stand up to him. But watching you today, seeing how you didn't let him intimidate you, it made me realize that I need to be braver." "We all do," Ruth agreed. "This show is supposed to be about women supporting women, sharing experiences, being honest and real. Piers never understood that. He thought it was his platform to pontificate and bully. Well, not anymore." As Denise prepared to leave the studio, she took one last look at Piers' empty chair. In a strange way, she felt grateful. Grateful that his mask had finally slipped. Grateful that millions of people had seen what happens when you stand up to a bully. And most of all, grateful that the message about mental health, despite all his efforts to derail it, had come through loud and clear. The story of what happened that day on Loose Women would be talked about for years to come. Not because of Piers Morgan's outburst, but because of how Denise Welch, with grace and strength, had shown everyone watching that you don't have to accept being treated poorly, that your voice matters, that standing up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable, is always worth it. And somewhere in the building, Piers Morgan was packing up his belongings from his dressing room, still insisting to anyone who would listen that he had been wronged, that he was the victim, that everyone else was out of line. But nobody was listening anymore. His microphone had been taken away, literally and figuratively. And for once in his career, Piers Morgan had nothing left to say that anyone wanted to hear.